Well, the time is just gone 8:43 as we continue with the broadcast, and we're going across now to be joined by Ashraf Patel, just getting some sort of an idea and a roundup and an analysis on what the 3 days of the BRICS summit had actually meant and what some of the key issues are. Ashraf, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jummah Mubarak to you.
Wa alaikum salam, Inayat and listeners, and Jummah Mubarak to all.
Ashraf, the 15th BRICS summit, just your overall view on the developments that had taken place and what stood out for you?
Yes, Inayat, it has been an intensive week and many, many months of hard work behind the scenes, especially by the various ministers and ministries and stakeholders. But my initial thoughts, yes, it is a very big success, a huge boost for the BRICS bloc and especially for the developing South. I would also hasten to mention that with the growth and invitation to new members, we now have the Middle East region as well as the Islamic world into the BRICS community. And that is a huge significance in terms of representativity. So overall, it has been a positive success.
Well, it has been obviously quite a success, even from a hosting perspective as well. And the key issue here is looking at some of the important aspects. Looking at the BRICS member nations, obviously they all come, from very very different ideologies. Number one, but also at the same time looking at their position on a global stage. You look at Russia, you look at China, very, very aggressive. You're looking at a country like India, and there has been criticism leveled against India sitting on a fence in terms of where its affiliation lies. Looking at own benefits, South Africa, non-aligned. Brazil is there. Now you've got all these other countries alike, and I'm looking at more significantly looking at the whole mix, basically a mixed bag. Saudi Arabia, Iran, we know the history between those countries. And then you have countries like Argentina, Egypt, all of them now, all with the expansion of BRICS and all these countries coming from very, very divergent approaches, in terms of international relations. I mean, how does it actually all fit in, Ashraf?
Yes, a very good question. So essentially, it is about economic development and opportunity. Each nation within the BRICS bloc has a very specific development and infrastructure requirement. If you look at Egypt and Ethiopia, these are nations with huge populations, over 80, 90 million, and with growing urbanization, and they need to invest heavily in serious infrastructure and building up of secondary cities. Now that's where the BRICS nations and especially China become significant as they've got all the expertise, the state-owned infrastructure, as well as the development finance. So if you saw the day before BRICS, the SA China Leadership Summit, that was a diplomatic masterstroke by President Ramaphosa, in a sense that he realized, quite late in the game though, that the real value and resources and opportunities will come from the East and China in particular. Because if you must recall that for several years, President Ramaphosa looked west, particularly at the G7, having attended 3 G7 summits over the years. And all those promises on the just energy and the resources have not been forthcoming. So he realized that with the dire energy crisis, there was no way out. And therefore, he hurriedly put in this diplomatic one-day summit, which was a success, a super success, by the way. So therefore, President Ramaphosa is hailed as being correctly a master diplomat. The way he managed the BRICS summit, the leadership South Africa displayed, all of that being very positive for South Africa and the African continent.
Well, definitely, and obviously, looking at, obviously the economic justification is critical in terms of the expansion, and obviously it will lend a lot more global clout to an organization like BRICS, but also leaving the door open to further expansion and just to see how these six additional countries go, and also. Looking at it from the global north perspective, I'm sure they've been watching this space with interest. There's been a massive interest right across the entire world at what has been playing out in South Africa. And we've heard certain rumblings that there's been somewhat of a mixed reaction coming through from the global north on what has played out and what the outcome of the 15th BRICS summit has been, Ashraf.
Yes, definitely. This is a big boost for multipolar world order. And you have a major power like China, an economic and development power that is anchored in BRICS and has the resources to underwrite almost a significant portion of the development finance resources. Remember, President Xi hardly makes overseas trips. And having traveled to Africa for the BRICS summit, I think has been his first or second trip this year only. And that in itself is significant. It would also mean a new shift in economic trade relations, the focus being on exports by Africa into BRICS nations. That is the big game changer. So if we upgrade our small and medium enterprises and we ensure there's enough empowerment for them to participate in exporting to China, Brazil, India, Russia, etc. This is where the real opportunities lay. And this is exactly what all these trade deals would open up. And I think that is the big boost. The global north are concerned to an extent, but many of them are quite pragmatic. The EU, for instance, don't see BRICS as necessarily a threat. Many of the EU nations have significant trade relationships with the East and with China in particular. And so all of this they see as complementing much of their efforts. The diversion or the differences would be in the political domain in international relations. So
Yes,
from
but
an
also,
economic
Ashraf,
development point of view, yes,
yeah, when we're talking about international relations and also looking at this 26-page declaration, making a number of calls, from reform of economic policies, the implications of geopolitical tensions, the global financial stability, all these issues obviously are in this declaration, but also taking a look at this whole issue surrounding resolution of global conflicts now. There's been calls like, for example, diplomatic talks to resolve the crisis in Niger, the ceasefire in Sudan. Palestine has been mentioned as well. Yet we have one of the key members, or in fact, I would say even China to an extent, when we're talking about global conflicts and conflict resolution, China and the Uyghurs, India and Kashmir, India and Muslims within India. Now, these are countries that are right at the forefront of some of these conflicts that are taking place. And again, if there is criticism, why have they been so selective?
yes, contradictions are basically a reality in international relations, and they would have to be managed. Just like many other blocs, if you look within the EU, for instance, Hungary is part of the EU, but it does not comply with much of the EU human rights framework. But because it's a strategic state in the east of Europe, the EU accepts it, etc., etc. So you're going to have these various contradictions within BRICS as well. Definitely, the optics from human rights, gender, and racial equity with BRICS and the new members is a huge challenge. And therefore, you have nations like South Africa and Brazil that have very strong human rights institutions, labor rights, as well as gender equality within their societies and the commissions and the institutions. And these are positives for BRICS. And South Africa can even share knowledge, South Africa and Brazil, with the other new BRICS members on the importance of labor rights, on the importance of gender equity, on the importance of diversity, etc. So, therefore, there are positive spin-offs and spillovers from nations like South Africa and Brazil, for instance, into the other BRICS membership. Whereas China is the strongest on economic and infrastructure development and technology. So it is an interesting balance, and they will make an impact on international reforms, and that's important. Peace and security is the number one issue, yes, and I can see good momentum, especially with the positive role President Ramaphosa has played and his diplomatic skills that have come to the fore. That will feed into a new momentum, I believe, as we try and resolve the Ukraine-Russia conflict, as well as conflicts in West Africa. So it's possible within the BRICS framework for BRICS nation states to work together and take the leadership to resolve these conflicts that is not necessarily taking the direction from the West. So it gives us power, it gives us leadership to resolve the conflicts. And yes, not in opposition to the West, but in kind of a complementary role that asserts the power and responsibility of global South partners. So it's a fascinating landscape we will see developing in the near future.
Well, so we're going to have to leave it at that. I know that there is still so much that we can talk about, and I'm sure on a detailed panel discussion, there's going to be a lot more that we will be discussing in the next couple of days with regard to BRICS, and we will be following developments. But for now, Jazakallah for your time. Have yourself a wonderful Jummah, inshallah.
Shukran. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Well, next up, Mufti Musa Sali from the Iftar department with the Jamiatul Ulama KwaZulu-Natal with our Jummah Nasiha.